The President's press conference from the State Department Auditorium in Washington, D.C., January 15, 1962.
Just one announcement. I'm sure you're all familiar with the story in this morning's paper of the documentation on the study of comparisons of those in our schools and universities and the kind of subjects which they study, which was published by the National Science Foundation. This has been a matter of some concern to me for some time, because one of the most critical problems facing this nation is the inadequacy of the supply of scientific and technical manpower to satisfy the expanding requirements of this country's research and development efforts in the near future. In 1951, our universities graduated 19,600 students in the physical sciences. In 1960, in spite of the substantial increase in our population during the last 10 years, and in spite of the fact that the demand for people of skill in this field has tremendously increased with our efforts in defense and space, industrial research, and all the rest, in 1960 the number had fallen from 19,600 to 17,100. In 1951, there were 22,500 studying in the biological sciences. In 1960, there were only 16,700. In the field of engineering, enrollment rose from 232,000 to 269,000 in the period 1951 to 1957. Since 1957, there has been a continual decline in enrollment. Last year, the figure was down to 240,000. This is a matter of growing concern. It is more than a matching of numerical supply to anticipated demands, though this alone would be difficult. Because of the seriousness of this problem for the long-range future of the United States, I have asked my Science Advisory Committee, in cooperation with the Federal Council for Science and Technology, to review available studies and other pertinent information and to report to me as quickly as possible on the specific measures that can be taken within and without the government to develop the necessary and well-qualified scientists and engineers and technicians to meet our society's complex needs, governmental, educational, and industrial. In undertaking this task, the committee will draw on the advice and assistance of individuals and agencies, including the National Academy of Science, which will shortly begin, at my request, a new study of scientific and technical manpower utilization. To all those who may be within the sound of my voice or who may follow your stories in the papers, I want to emphasize the great new and exciting field of the sciences. And while we wish to emphasize always the liberal arts, I do believe that these figures indicate that a need on the national level and also a great opportunity for talented young men and women. And I hope that their teachers, their school boards, and they themselves and their families will give this matter consideration in developing their careers.
Mr. President, as you're aware, there's been nothing official on this, but there's been some unofficial reports stemming from Ambassador Thompson's first two exploratory conferences in Moscow. These reports to the effect that the situation with Russia had not changed. Could you tell us, sir, whether as a result of Mr. Thompson's two meetings in Moscow that you detect any evidence, new evidence, of a possible solution of our differences with Russia over Berlin?
I think that it's my hope that these talks will continue so that this matter will be subjected to the most thorough scrutiny and examination to see whether such an arrangement is possible. Mr. Ambassador Thompson, I'm hopeful, therefore, will meet with the foreign minister again, and after these meetings have gone on for a reasonable period, we can make a much more concise judgment in answer to your question, but I think it would be premature today.
Mr. President, yes? In that connection, could you give us any idea of the length of a reasonable period of time?
No, I think it would really depend upon the what was happening during the negotiations. In other words, if progress was being made, or if there were evidence that progress could be made, of course, then time would be different than it would be if there was no evidence of any meeting of the minds. So I think the important thing now is to continue, and Ambassador Thompson will.
President.
Yes.
The United States has made informal but strenuous efforts to reach a peaceful solution of the Indonesian-Dutch dispute. Could you say, sir, if your hopes are in any way possible of fulfillment now, and if our efforts should fail, would we then turn to the United Nations?
We do not have any more precise information than the news story with which you're familiar in regard to the statement of the Dutch. We have been extremely anxious that a peaceful accommodation be reached in this matter, and have used our influence to bring that about. I am particularly glad that the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. U Thant, has been occupying himself with a good deal of energy to try to see if there is a possibility for a peaceful settlement. I'm hopeful that both parties will respond to his efforts, and that we can prevent an outbreak of hostilities between Indonesia and the Dutch. Great responsibility rests on both of these countries, and I'm hopeful that they will give Mr. U Thant every cooperation, because the alternatives would not be happy for the world, or really, I think, in the long run, for the parties involved. A peaceful solution, of course, would be the best thing, and that's what we're working for.
Mr. President.
Ms. Morgan?
This is a question about your trade liberalization program. Some members of Congress from industrial areas are reporting privately that they are worried about the problems of their support of the program, because some of their manufacturing constituents say that unless they are able to get things, for example, like wool and cotton at world market prices instead of artificial prices, that they can't afford to go along with the idea of reducing trade barriers. Can you give us your assessment of how serious you think this problem is, and do you see any possible encouragement to them on it?
Well, and of course, there are two different. One is cotton, which is in surplus here in the United States, and the other is wool, which we import. In the case of cotton, as you know, we send out, export about 6 million bales of cotton a year, and we import about 600,000 manufactured bales of textiles. In fact, we export almost as much cotton, manufactured textiles, as we import. So the export of cotton is a very important ingredient in our balance of payments. I think the Japanese alone buy, I think, almost $240 or $50 million of cotton. I believe, as I said before, that while some industries may not get the same benefit out of this proposal as others will, that generally it will be very helpful to industry, and very helpful to agriculture, and most helpful to the United States. And I think that if the members of Congress begin to examine the figures in their districts and in their states, and these figures are being prepared, which show where the balance of trade runs, then I think that we can get a majority support for the legislation. A good deal of concern is expressed about Japan, but we ran a $500 million balance of trade in our favor. We sold Japan last year $500 million more than they bought from us, so that I believe the United States can compete. As I said the other day, the fact is that the common market countries have had an extraordinary economic growth, full employment and all the rest, and it is to increase our employment and our opportunities that we're recommending it. So in answer to your question, I believe that when the members of the House and Senate have examined our proposal, examined its safeguards, examined what it can do for employment, I am hopeful. In fact, I feel it very possible that we can secure a majority, even though it's a sophisticated matter and it's difficult to explain quickly, but I think that when the educational job is done, I think the country will understand that it's in our best interests.
President.
Yes?
Mr. President, are American troops now in combat in Vietnam?
No.
Mr. President, Secretary Freeman has said that it's impossible to expand the Food for Peace program, and Mr. McGovern says it should be expanded. Have you been able to resolve this difference?
Well, I think it should be expanded as we can. I think that Mr. Freeman's concern is with, first, the regular markets of trade, that the Food for Peace should complement it and not cut across it. The obligations we have to others who are also exporters of agricultural commodities. The question of funds and finances. of how much, if we're talking about $2 billion a year, which we are now, I think that I'm hopeful that we can use our productive power well in this field. But I think that the question of the balance, and I think that Mr. McGovern and Mr. Freeman, in my judgment, will be in balance by the time they go before the Congress. Because I think they both have the same basic interest in using our food well and not having it wasted in storage.
What
Yes?
can you tell us about the administration's efforts to speed up the bargaining timetable in the steel industry, and what do you hope to accomplish by this?
Well, I am hopeful, of course, from the beginning that an agreement would be reached in the steel industry, which would be, as I said in my letter to Mr. McDonald, which would be within the range of productivity and price stability, and which would come at a time, though I have not said this before, would come at a time which would prevent a repetition of what we saw in 1958, where there was a tremendous increase in inventory in the first 6 months of the year, which adversely affected the economy in the last half of the year, and also adversely affected employment in the steel mills themselves. So while they worked at a very high capacity for the first 6 months, there were a good many layoffs after the strike. Now, if an agreement can be reached between the steel companies and the steel union, of course it would be well to have it come early, so that the country and the consumers of steel would be able to make their plans for the future without stockpiling. Now, this is a judgment for them. This is a free economy. The federal government has no power unless there was a strike which affects the national emergency. But Secretary Goldberg is available for whatever good offices he may perform. Yes?
After 1 year in the office of the presidency, sir, would you care to give us any of your comments about the first year, and perhaps in particular the most rewarding and disappointing events that's come across your
Well,
desk?
I would say that the most disappointing event was our failure to get an agreement on cessation of nuclear testing, because I think that that might have been a very important step in easing the tension, in preventing a proliferation of the weapons, and also in making it more possible for us to have progress on disarmament and some of the other matters that divide us. My thing that I think is the most heartening is the fact that first, I think there's a greater surge for unity in the Western nations and in our relations with Latin America. And also, I think it has become more obvious that people do desire to be free and independent. And while they may organize their societies in different ways, they do want to maintain a national sovereignty, which I regard as a great source of strength to us. I've had other disappointments, but those are...
In the past, it would seem that coalition governments lean toward communist control. Are we then taking a chance in supporting a coalition-type government in Southeast Asia?
We are taking a chance in all of Southeast Asia, and we're taking a chance in other areas. Nobody can make any predictions sure for the future, really, on any matter in which there are powerful interests at stake. I think, however, that we have to consider what our alternatives are and what the prospects for war are in that area if we fail in our present efforts, and the geographic problems which would have to be surmounted in such a military engagement, where there is no easy entrance by sea, and where the geographic location is extremely a long way from us and very close to those who might become involved. So that there's no easy, sure answer for Laos. But it is my judgment that in the best interests of our country to work for a neutral and independent Laos, we are attempting to do that. And I can assure you that I recognize the risks that are involved, but I also think we should consider the risks if we fail, and particularly of the possibility of escalation of a military struggle in a place of danger. So we're going to attempt to work out this matter in a way which permits us to try.
Mr. President, the inter-American foreign ministers are due to meet at Punta del Este next Monday. In advance of that meeting, could you tell us what kind of action you hope the meeting will take to check Castroism?
Well, I think it is the consensus of the hemisphere that communism is a threat, that it's sustained and supported by alien forces, that it has no place in the inter-American system, and that we are against dictatorships of the right and left. And now that the Dominican Republic is moving from a dictatorship of the right we are hopeful that there will be the voice of the hemisphere will speak against dictatorships of the left, which are sustained and supported from outside the hemisphere. I think that we will get that consensus.
Mr. President, the agricultural proposals now under preparation appear to involve a good deal of control of production and marketing by the government. Following your long conference with Secretary Freeman, do you now hold the view that if the government is to continue farm price support programs, there must be control or management of production?
Well, management, I think what we were attempting to do is prevent the surpluses, which we are able to produce because of the extraordinary productivity of our farms. I said the other day in the State of the Union address that our per capita production has increased nearly 100% in the last 10 years, which is faster than our consumption is increasing. And as we have somewhat more difficulty maintaining some of our markets abroad, in my judgment, we should attempt to provide, with the support of the farmers and the Congress, a reasonable balance which will protect their income. Otherwise, these surpluses will break the farmers' income, or they'll be piled up so high and in the sheds of the United States in storage that the whole program of trying to assist farmers will fall into discredit, and the farmer himself will be damaged. So what we are attempting to do, and this is extremely difficult because of the variety of opinions that are involved, is try to work with the farmer and the Congress to try to bring about a balance between production for our domestic use, for our world use, for food for peace, and at the same time ensure that the farmer income will not be broken by surpluses as it was to a substantial extent in the 20s. And that's our effort, and I think it's essential that we succeed if the public interest and the farmers are going to be protected.
Mr. President, this has to do with the conduct of our judicial system. In the last several years, at least 2 federal judges have resigned from the bench to go back to practice law. Since federal judges are appointed for life, would you care to comment on the possible impact of this type of resignation on the judicial system and, in fact, upon the ethical standards of the community?
I think that the reason that they're appointed for life is so that there can not only be no actual improprieties, but no appearance of improprieties. And while I would not make any judgment in the 2 cases you mentioned, I don't think that anyone should accept a federal judgeship unless they're prepared to fill it for life, because I think the maintenance of the integrity of the judiciary is so important. So I hope that all judges will stay till the end of their term. Yes?
Sir, last April, during the general's vote in Algeria, you made an offer. It wasn't clear from here whether it was an offer of support or aid to General de Gaulle. If a similar instance should occur in the near future, would you make a similar offer to President de Gaulle of either support or aid?
Well, I don't think that you've described completely precisely the kind of message which I sent to General de Gaulle, and I think that probably proffer of assistance would not be a precise description of it. Now, if we felt that I would think that it would be unwise to speculate about the future, but this was a matter which was handled by the French, and no request was made for assistance, and none was offered.
Mr. President, in the case of Kashmir, India has failed to keep its promise to hold free elections, and it resorted with impunity in attacking Goa on December 17th. Could you tell us what the United States could do to assure that a double standard of action does not arise in the United Nations?
Well, there are several different questions. We are against a double standard of action in the United Nations, and I think that we've attempted to make that clear. And that double standard goes to a whole variety of different things, not just the matters that you mentioned in your question. Now, on the matter of Kashmir, we have been and are concerned that an accommodation or a solution be reached, because both countries have numerous external and internal problems, and we have been assisting both countries to build a more viable economy, and quite obviously everything that is put to arms as a result of their frictions, of course, takes it from the general effort. And we're going to continue our efforts.
Mr. President, there are two appeals pending in the Office of Emergency Planning that relate to foreign trade. One seeks protection for the textile industry, and the other seeks a reduction in import restrictions on residual oil. Could you tell us what progress is being made on these appeals, and in particular, if any recommendations has come to your...
Well, we did make a recommendation about a month ago on residual oil, which provided for some increase in the amount that could be imported in, I think most of it from Venezuela. In the matter of textiles, that is one of the subjects which was part of our 7-point proposal to the textile industry that we would consider. We have made some progress with the textile industry. The voluntary agreement, which was made by the Undersecretary, Mr. Ball, which is trying to bring about a happier distribution of textile production in a way that doesn't cause dumping. I think that that's been a help to the textile industry. The change we made on depreciation allowances, there are other matters which we're now looking into, and this is one of them. But it is a fact that the importation of textiles this year, which had gone from about 4 to 7% from 58 to 60, was down for various reasons to 6%, so that the import situation was somewhat eased for the textile industry. But in answer to your question, both of these matters are before us.
Mr. President, the criticism that we did not tear down the Berlin Wall seems to be increasing rather than declining. Just less than, or about a week ago, the chairman of the Republican National Committee criticized your administration very strenuously. I don't recall that you've ever publicly discussed this particular phase of the question. Do you think it would be helpful for you to do so now?
Well, I have discussed it. I stated that no one at that time in any position of responsibility, and I would use that term, either in the West Berlin American contingent, in West Germany, France, or Great Britain, suggested that the United States or the other countries go in and tear down the wall. The Soviet Union had a de facto control for many years, really stretching back to the late 40s in East Berlin. It had been turned over as a capital for East Germany a long time ago, and the United States has a very limited force, surrounded by a great many divisions. We are going to find ourselves severely challenged to maintain what we have considered to be our basic rights, which is our presence in West Berlin and the right of access to West Berlin and the freedom of the people of West Berlin. But in my judgment, I think that you could have had a very violent reaction which might have taken us down a very rocky road, and I think that it was for that reason, and because it was recognized by those people in positions of responsibility, that no recommendation was made along the lines you suggested at that time. Hindsight is...
It's been more than 4 months since the Soviets began their series of nuclear tests in the atmosphere. I think you'd agree it would be imprudent not to assume that they're not preparing further tests. Can you discuss what the overriding considerations are to cause us to give this potential enemy a gift of that length of time? And can you also tell us when we may expect a decision on your part in this matter of testing in the atmosphere?
Well, as you know, we have tested in underground, so that in talking about the gift of time, that matter should be taken into consideration. Secondly, of course, we were negotiating at the table at Geneva when the Soviet Union, after many months of preparation, had began its tests. I have announced that we are making our tests to conduct preparations to conduct atmospheric testing if it's considered to be in the public interest when those preparations are completed, so that it's wholly impossible for a free country like the United States with a free press to prepare in secret the extensive make the extensive preparations which would be necessary. At the same time, we're conducting a very important and vital negotiation, so that the Soviet Union has that advantage. They have advantages as a dictatorship in this Cold War struggle, but they have very serious disadvantages, and I think we have to balance them one against the other.
Mr. President, during the election campaign, you pledged that if elected you would issue an executive order prohibiting racial segregation in federally assisted housing. It's recently been reported that you have decided to
postpone the issuance of such an order for some time. I wondered if you could give us your thinking on this timing question, why you want to put it off.
Well, I think that I have stated that I would issue that order when I considered it to be in the public interest and when I considered it to make an important contribution to advancing the rights of our citizens. I will point out that this administration in the last 12 months made more progress in the field of civil rights on a whole variety of fronts than were made in the last 8 years. We have, for example, carried out a great many more suits in voting rights, the appointment of federal employees, judges and their employees, in ending segregation in interstate travel, in terminal facilities, the ICC's work, and the work being done on railroad and airports. And we are had, I think, at least the communities involved, made important progress in integrating in the fall. So we are proceeding ahead in a way which will maintain a consensus and which will advance this cause. And I think a proper judgment can be made on this and all other matters relating to equality of rights at the end of this year and at the end of our term. And in my judgment, we are going to make significant progress, and I am fully conscious of the wording of the statement to which you refer, and plan to meet my responsibilities in regard to this matter. Yeah?
Would you care to comment on how the bond issue to the United Nations can tip the scale in favor of the United States?
Can do what?
Can tip the scale in the favor of the United States?
Well, I think it can help strengthen the United Nations, which I think is in the interest of the United States. And I think that if we do not have a bond issue or a satisfactory substitute, and I have not heard of one, in my judgment, the UN will go sail into very difficult weather in regard to its financing and could be on the verge of bankruptcy. And I think this is a way, along with the decision which will be rendered by the court in regard to the payment of their obligations, this is a way to spread the burden more equitably and ensure the United Nations has adequate funds. Now, I look at what's happening in the Congo, where progress is being made towards the establishment of an independent Congo. And if Mr. Tshombe and the Prime Minister, based on their agreement at Cotonou, can continue to make progress, we may have a real hope there. So in my opinion, the United Nations justifies the effort we put into it substantially. We rely very heavily, as I said earlier today, on the Secretary General in regard to what is happening now in the West New Guinea and in Indonesia, so that I believe in it strongly, and I think that this is a way to strengthen it, which tips the scale, I think, in the interests of peace and those nations who wish to be free.
Mr. President, this afternoon 2,000 American women, many of them from distant places, demonstrated in a downpour in front of the White House on behalf of disarmament and peace. Do you consider this sort of demonstration useful, and does it have an influence on you and other world leaders who are responsible for peace?
Well, I think these women are extremely earnest. They talk to, and they are as concerned as we all are at the possibility of a nuclear war. They talked this morning to Mr. Fisher, who's the Deputy Director of our disarmament agency, and we stressed the effort we were going to put into the disarmament conference coming up in March. I saw the ladies myself. I recognized why they were there. There were a great number of them. It was in the rain. I understood what they were attempting to say, and therefore I considered that their message was received.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Almost precisely a year ago, President Eisenhower, in his farewell address, discussed the influence of the military-industrial alliance in the defense spending program. I wonder, sir, if in your first year in office you have developed similar concern for this problem.
I think that President Eisenhower commented on a matter which deserves continuing attention by the President and also by the Secretary of Defense. There gets to be a great vested interest in expenditures because of the employment that's involved in all the rest, and that's one of the struggles which he had and which we have. And I think his warning or his words were well taken.